All right, it is 2 o'clock and we want to be um, aware of everybody's time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the 2025 changes. We're going to be looking at the new certification form today. Um, there's going to be a new part of that. So Tony's here. He'll help me out with some of the other reminders that we have going through this as well. So we'll go through the new certification section. Um, and then, like I said, Tony will take over on the 2025 reminders, which are the rates, the total actual value report, the qualified local share report, and those backfill reports that are going to be due. God, they never end, right? So the 2025 certification. This year, we are going to have a new portion of the certification evaluation that we report to all of our local governments. This is the 5.25% property tax revenue limit. So it's 5.25% annually or 10.5% over 2 years. This new limit is going to apply to local governments that have the authority to exceed both the 5.5 limit and Tabor. You're going to provide them with the information where they can calculate these new limitations that they have. It is the responsibility of the local governments to know if it applies to them or not. So your job in this is to complete the form and make sure they have the information. That's it. Okay. It does exclude school districts and home rule local governments. And since it excludes those school districts, we're going to use our local government assessed values. You can look it up in statute if you so desire. So sections 29.1, 1701 through 29.1, 1705 are going to give you those definitions, some guidance, and then the definition of local government entity, excluding school districts and home rule local governments, is found in 29.1, 1701, paren 1.5. This is what it looks like. It's pretty similar to the 5.5 limitation that we have now. There are examples of the form in your handouts as well as an instruction sheet. I believe Lori put the link in the chat if you don't have a copy of that form. So if you want to open it up and follow along, we can go through that. What we emailed out are going to be line by line instructions to let you know what information you need to certify and where to get that information. You're going to certify by August 25th, so that hasn't changed. We just have this new portion that goes along with that. You're going to certify to all of your taxing authorities except school districts and home rule local governments. If you don't know what one of your local governments falls under, send them the information, right? You're going to give them the information, their responsibility to determine if it applies to them or not. Because it's a revenue limit, it is going to be based on those assessed valuations. So again, very similar to the 5.5% limitation that we have right now. And let's just go through it line by line. So you know what information needs to be there. On the handouts, we have labeled in the totals, we've started with letters on there, so it's easier to follow in the instructions. So line 1, the total is also AA. That is going to be your total year's gross taxable assessed valuation. You certify this in the 5.2 or the 5.5, nothing new. Line 2 or AB is going to be your total TIF increment value. Same as what we do currently. Line 3 is the net taxable value. So you take your gross, subtract your increment, and we get our net taxable value. Line 4, or AD, is your new construction. Same thing as we're doing right now. Line 5 are going to be your annexations or inclusion values. Again, it's the same as in the 5.5% limitation. Line 6 is where we have a difference. So here we're going to report previously exempt property, all of it. You only report the federal on your 5.5. So in your 5.25, we're just going to expand that and report the assessed value of all of our previously exempt property. Okay. Line 7, we're going to look at our omitted property. We are going to certify the tax amount received on that omitted property. Same thing as we do for the 5.5 limitation right now, and you get this information from your treasurer, right? So far we only have that one change. Line number 8, this is brand new, okay? This is AH on your form. This is the increased valuation for assessment due to a change in law for classification. This is not a change in use. If you had a residential property in 24 and it was converted to a commercial property on January 1 of 25, that's a change in use, not a change in law. So do not track that. Our interpretation of this is if there is a new law that changes assessment rates going forward. We did not have any changes in law in the 2025 session that would need to be tracked. So for this year, no one should be tracking anything for this line. If there's a change going forward, that's when we will that's when we will track that change due to the change in law.
Wendy, Andy Wyatt.
Hi, Andy.
Do you have an example of that, please?
So let's say next legislative session, we have something that changes the assessment rate for, I don't know, commercial property to 30% assessment rate. We would track the increase in valuation due to that assessment rate change. Right now, we didn't have a change in law that increased any assessment rates. Our assessment rates were established before this session, and we don't have a new law that has changed the assessment rate. So we don't have any increase in assessment rates due to change in law.
But we will have the possibility of an assessment rate change on residential after the state board meets.
That's correct, Andy. There is a possibility of a change, but not a likelihood, but a possibility. Wendy, are you, so Andy's right. If there is more than a 5% change in value overall, then the State Board of Equalization will lower the assessment rate to that which is in statute. Tony, do you want to remind us what that amount is? I think it was in 1001.
The 5%?
Right.
Oh,
if it's more than 5%, the residential, the state equalization is supposed to adjust the assessment rate down to, and I
It goes from, for local governments, it'll go from, down to 6.15. Currently,
Right.
it's 6.25. And likewise,
And-
the schools go from 7.05 to 6.9.
Except the schools are going to be where they are because the state board froze that in January. So if there's an adjustment that needs to be made for schools, it'll be made next year, not this year when they do the counterfactual, whatever they call it. So for schools, it is at the 705. The state board set that in January. But for local governments, if the if the value change was more than 5% statewide, they will change it down. They will change it down to the 6.15. And that happens in October.
Okay.
And then we have to know that difference of that 0.10 in the assessment rate.
Well, you're going to have to provide that to your taxing jurisdictions. The assessment rate will be at 6.15 rather than being at 6.25.
So it's not on the August one that we have to do that. It'll be on the December one.
Correct. Because we won't know by August.
Does it make any difference? This says increased valuation due to change in law, and that would be a decrease if it goes down?
It's only tracking increase in value in this case, so it doesn't matter if it decreases.
I don't think it matters if it decreases, but Andy's right in that it could be different. But it will be a decrease, not an increase.
Yeah, so essentially, if any new legislation happens that would provide and cause an increase in value, then that would need to be tracked. That difference would need to be tracked.
Tony, Sarah asked, would an ag assessment rate fall under that for 2025? And I don't think any of the changes that happened, we've already encapsulated all of the 2025 changes. And those were done in 2024 legislation.
Yeah, all the changes through 27 that are, were done in the 24 legislation session, whether it was the normal session or the extraordinary session. So at that point, that's our demarcation point from what was in law at that point going forward. That's how our interpretation is.
Well, okay, this is surprised me. Thanks, Tony. So you're saying that it's not for each assessment year, it's what happens in the session for each year.
That's where that is correct, Toby. That's where they change. Because it requires a change in law.
Okay.
And the
All
laws are currently set.
Right.
That at least is our interpretation.
Oh, man. Okay, thanks.
Although you will have to be providing those changed assessment rates to your taxing jurisdictions. The only time the residential will change is this year. Well, not true. Residential changes this year if it's more than 5% statewide in value growth. Next year, residential will change to 6.9.
6.8, but with the 10% of the first 700,000
right,
actual value reduction.
All residential assessment changes to, but then you have your value.
Joanne, you cut out there at the end. Would you repeat that sentence?
Tony said it.
Thank you.
And I'll go over the assessment rates here shortly, at least for 25, and we can talk about 26 too, if you like. Are there any other questions before Wendy continues?
Hey, Tony, and maybe Joanne, maybe this would be helpful, but I think it might be helpful recall what the intention of the legislature was for making this additional revenue limitation effective?
I don't know what you're trying to get at, Mike.
Well, I mean, this is a good exercise in terms of understanding what we need to track and report, but I think it's also helpful to understand what the motivation of the legislature was to create this additional revenue limitation. And as I recall, they were concerned that when the values went up so dramatically in the 2023 reappraisal, local governments weren't necessarily adjusting their mill levies, and so you get these really high tax bills. So they wanted to create this additional restriction because a lot of local governments had, Deep Roost and had their voters allow them to not be bound to the 5.5, right?
And in the paper.
Yeah, and so they wanted to put some guardrails on local governments' ability to increase their revenue. And during that process, local governments were saying, well, hey, what about this? What about this? So these carve-outs. And so these were the carve-outs, I think, that the legislature thought would be appropriate. And some some stakeholders weren't happy because, as you recall, Joanne, we talked about like metro districts. They were contemplating, or special districts were contemplating, well, what if we put in new infrastructure and that increases our value? Is that going to be a carve out? And that didn't make it into these provisions. And so I think when we look at what we're tracking, these are carve outs that allow local governments to that have value increases to be able to collect revenue from those value increases.
Well, that, Toby, again, that has me thinking that as the assessment rate goes up due to a previous law, that we should be reporting it so that they can collect that additional revenue. Wouldn't that track? Now, I see the words new law there. Okay. But if that was the intent, would we not be reporting the increased value to the higher rate?
Tony, this is Jody Amato. Didn't you say that our benchmark started in 2024 for any subsequent new law?
That is our interpretation. So it is going forward.
Okay. Good enough for me, thanks.
Is that all the questions on that line item? Okay. Line number 9 is going to be your abated taxes. This is the same as what you do right now. You get this information from the treasurer, and those line items should match between your 5.5 and your 5.25. Was there a question? Okay.
Somebody wasn't muted. Wendy
Okay.
got him.
Thank you. Okay. Line number 10, this is also new. This is the total value of your producing mines and oil and gas. So all of the assessed value for all of your mine production and oil and gas, you report the assessed value for your production on this line, not just from a new source. Remember, in the 5.5, we're just looking at new oil and gas wells. This, we're going to look at our total value of all of the mines and oil and gas. And then line 11, this is also new. We are going to report the revenue increase from an expired TIF. Because it's revenue, we are going to get that information from our treasurer, and we're going to report it on this line. And that is all that I have on the new certification form. Remember, you're going to report this on August 25th with your current certification form. And it should be simple.
Hey, Wendy, this is Scott, Will County. Just a quick question on number 5, the annexation inclusions. On your instructions, AE, you'd list the increased valuation. So that sounds like a different value than what we currently report on page 1.
We track that additional value, right? We look at what that additional value is, and we track that in the 5.5. That's the same thing that we're going to do here. That will be excluded from that limitation. So we're going to, because we're expanding those boundaries, those properties that are outside of the existing boundaries, we're not going to be punished for that. We can exclude that from that revenue growth.
Sure. Okay.
Does that
I'm just getting hung up on the word increased valuation.
Well, so if we had a geographic boundary that was this size, we have that value in this circle. If we expand those boundaries, we're going to add value, right?
Yes.
From the inner circle to the outer circle. So we're going to report that additional value that's due to that expansion of that taxing area. So that we're going to pull that out of our calculation. So we're comparing apples to apples with that 5.5 or the 5.25, either one, because we can expand our revenue based on that value, but we don't want to be punished for the additional revenue that comes from those additional properties. So that's why we exclude that.
Yeah. Okay. I think I understand that. It is different wording than the definition of number 7. So that's why I was asking.
Let me look at that and make sure. Yeah, we'll talk about that and make sure that's clarified. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you.
And before we run off to start on all my reminders, Toby brought up a good point on where I put in the slide new law. It's actually change in law, and that's why we say in 24 these laws were passed. So if there's any change in that law going in the laws around assessment rates going forward after the 24 sessions, then that's what will have to be tracked. Not new law, just change in law, to be specific. All right, Wendy. Are there any more questions before we go on just to my reminders?
This is Renetta Thielen with Lincoln County, and I have a question about exempt mobile homes that become taxable. So do they go in previously exempt because they were exempted by the prior law during the reappraisal? Their values were increased and now they're back on as taxable. Should they be in that section?
They should be reported because we weren't able to tax them last year. So again, that value is going to be reported so we can exclude those from those calculations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Back up one slide, Wendy, please.
Yep. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
So I'm just going to remind everybody of the rates for this year, the actual value reporting that we're going to need that's unique to this year. Remind you about the schools, the local share report that you did in December. And then we're going to talk briefly about the backfill. And since I went to Iceland in February, I've got 2 pictures of the Aurora Borealis just for your entertainment. So go ahead and move on to the next. Thanks. So this year is a wonderful year when it comes to regard to non-residential properties. Everything's on the same rate. Finally, we're back to 27%, and there are no actual value adjustments for anything that's non-res. So that makes everybody's life much easier. So it'll change again next year, but then come all back together again in 27. So we're enjoying this year at least. All right, and then we go next slide, please. For the residential rates, we do have two assessment rates for residential properties this year. The first one is the school rate of either 7.05, which is what we have currently using, or everybody's using in their systems, or it could go down to 6.95%. And we talked about that briefly, and I'll talk about it when we're done with this. Go ahead, Wendy. The local governments are at 6.25% or 6.15%. This year, you're allowed to use the multiplier for the counties that have not implemented the split rates. And there are no actual value adjustments this year. I think I might have one more. And so that little asterisk, I mean, we already talked about this briefly, is going to be, there is a possibility that if the growth rate between 24 and 25 of actual value of all property goes up by more than 5%, then the rates are going to drop down by 1/10. And that's what's indicated by the asterisks. We will know that. We're going to talk about, you're going to provide us that information by August 25th, and that information will then be passed on to the State Board of Equalization, who will make the appropriate change if necessary, probably in their October meeting. That meeting is going to be busy for the State Board. So right now we're using the Legislative Council staff's forecast of that the growth rate they're expecting is going to be less than 5%. And that's why we've recommended everybody use the 7.05 or the 6.25 for schools and local governments in their systems.
Tony, Andy Wyatt.
Hey, Andy.
You briefly hit on that school rate of 7.05 and 6.95. Is there a possibility that our second certification might go to that 7.95?
Or you mean the 6? Joanne spoke to that earlier, and her understanding is that it won't.
Then why do we have it here?
Well, it's because we're only doing this check on from 24 to 25 once, and then it's going to be changed forever going forward. And so that's why I have it there, because it'll be dropped down by 1/10 next year and the year after.
That's on. So I'm sorry, Andy, were you talking about the residential rate, or are you talking about all the other rates?
The school rate.
Okay, the school rate is at 7.05, and the process for the school rate is somewhat different. So it was set at 7.05 by the State Board of Equalization in January. If the growth goes above the 5%, the state board will adjust the local government rate to the 6.15. And we'll be able to get that idea will be much more exact because we'll have all of your abstracts by August 25th. So we'll be able to know what that value growth was. The school rate will still be at 7.05. In January of next year, they will have to do, and they use this word counterfactual, but what actually is going to happen is they will adjust the school rate, the school residential rate by what the actual growth was. They'll make that adjustment If they had made an error in the 7.05, then we'll make that adjustment and catch that up in years, in next year's school finance rate. And the state board will go through that activity with legislative council doing the research, us providing it to the state board. They're going to do that every year. That is ongoing for schools. For local governments, they do it the once and it's done. But for schools, they have to do it. They're going to be doing it every year. There will be a report from legislative council staff by January 15th, and the state board will have to meet within 21 days, and they will set the school rate. And the reason for that is that the school rate being set in January is necessary for them because of the school backfill. So they want to leave it the same for that year, and then they want to make up for it if they were wrong in the next year, so that it doesn't have a negative impact on school finance. So, so there will be a state board meeting every year in late January, early February now.
My reason for asking that question was not for us, but for the vendors. You know, at the very last minute.
Yeah, they will last minute on local governments if it's over 5% this year. But on the school rate that they used at 7.05, that is for this year. It will not change for 2025.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Wendy, you can change. So this is what we were just talking about. You guys have already provided your 2024 total actual values to us, and so we're going to need the 2025 actual values, and you're going to send us an email on by August 25th. Go ahead, Wendy, you can click through all this. Go ahead. And you're going to mail it to, well, go back. Get excited. And we're going to then do the calculations. You're going to email those, send that email to the reporting email box. And basically, we just want two numbers, your total actual value of taxable and total actual value of exempt. I know some counties had trouble separating them. They could only give us their overall total actual value, and that's fine. You know, so one or two numbers, the total actual value of everything, or the total actual value of taxable and total actual value of exempt. And you don't exclude anything. And so we're going to use that to calculate what the change is from 24 to 25. And we're just, there's no forms to fill out or anything like that. You're just going to send an email once you're done with your, I know, so for those that are all the large counties and those using the alternate appeal calendar, they're going to be pretty preliminary numbers, but we don't have any choice. We have to have this information August 25th. So it will be before, while most counties will have completed their CBOE, the large counties will not have. We understand that, but that's how the calendar is set. It's already set in stone, and so we have to go forward with that. Okay. The qualified local shares for schools report. You're going to submit the qualified. So you did this in December. You can fill out the other, Wendy. Again, this is another one report. So you did this in December for us, and that was a one-time thing to be done in December. From now on, from this year going forward, this report's going to be due to us by August 25th. All right, when the same time you're doing all of your other reporting. Again, this report is something you've already done, and again, you're going to mail this report to the reporting mailbox that we've set up. And when you're sending these various reports and information to the reporting mailbox, just put on the subject line what it's for, whether it's for school, qualified local share of schools, whatever you want to say, schools, whatever, or like total actual value or something like that. That way it makes it easier for me and Lori to sort through all those because they're all going to come in at once. We would appreciate that. But again, this is something you're going to do annually. It's something that you started last year, but at a different time, just because of the way we needed that information. And again, we compile this information and give it to legislative council staff, and then they do their work with it and decide, and then report back to the State Board of Equalization in regards to any possibility of changing the school assessment rate for the coming year. And again, that all happens in the fall and winter, and then the SBOE will meet in late January, early February, and make the final determination. Okay?
Hey, Tony.
Yes.
Scott, Will County again. There'd be no reason to send this to the individual school districts, correct?
Correct. It's just for us.
Thank you.
Okay, and here's I just did it, created an image of just to remind you what that form looked like, and we moved that form now on the link with all of our other forms, by the way, and so it's all on the same page on our website now. Last year it was at a different place because it was new legislation, but now it's old stuff that we do every year. Okay. Now let's talk about the 2025 backfill. So this backfill is this is the way the language in the bill from the extraordinary session 1001 laid it out. It deals with the change. It compares the 2024 assessed value of real property with the 2025 assessed value of real property. So it's different than the backfill that happened this year that you reported. So we have to create a new spreadsheet for you. A couple of the items, it's due to the lost value due to the language in the bill. So it's not just anything, lost value due to any reason, like it was this past year. So it's going to be tied to the value lost due to the changes in 1001. And again, it's going to be the 2024, the modified mill levy. So we continue using the modified mill levy, but this time it's the 2024 modified mill levy multiplied by the lost value of real property. It only concerns of real property. So you're going to have to extract, when you're filling out the spreadsheet, you need to extract all your personal property values. Okay. We're going to have a spreadsheet for you. We don't have it yet, but we have some time. And again, you're going to report it no later than March 1st of 2026. The one thing I want to caution you about is, so this year, everybody filled out their spreadsheets and you only send us the ones that have lost value. We don't want to see the spreadsheets for everybody, only lost value, and it excludes schools again, just like it always has. But there was not enough money allocated to backfill everybody. So everybody got a percentage, and therefore it drained that account. In 25, the legislature did not have a new allocation. They did not budget for any more money for this year's coming backfill. And so, and we all have, or many of you have probably heard that there's budget issues at the state, and the chances of having a money allocated, at least my personal opinion, is very, very small. And so so we still have to go through the work of doing these spreadsheets because it's in law. but currently there's no allocation for it. And if a local government if you're speaking to a local government, I would recommend that you tell them not to count on anything. And then therefore, if they do get something, it's a bonus. But make sure they're not counting on receiving anything. All right. The legislator could find money under a pillow somewhere and provide for this. I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't count on it. So that's just sort of a public service announcement that you could share with your local governments if they're asking you.
Tony, Andy, well, I had another question.
Sure.
On the slide before this one, the 2025 backfill, compare the 24 with 25 assessed value of real property.
Yep.
Assessed value.
Yes.
Real property. Does that include the school values? Assessed value?
No. So like we did last year, I'm probably going to have you put in actual values. Then I'm going to have the assessment rates, and then I'm going to calculate. It's going to calculate it for you. But the backfill will have to do with the assessed value, and it doesn't have anything to do with schools, only local government. So you don't have to worry about. I don't have to worry about different assessment rates. Yeah, the schools get funded differently. They're not. They have not participated in the backfill mechanism for the last few years because there's a School Finance Act takes care of that.
Key to that is the backfill.
Yes. Yeah, it's a backfill for local governments that lost money due to the past legislation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And again, here you can find all these forms that you're going to be dealing with. Well, like I said, we moved the local share form over onto this forms page. You can just go to our website and type in forms, or there's a link. There's a link on the right-hand side there on our front page of our website. When we create the spreadsheet for this, we'll let you know in a bulletin memo. We'll send out a link to it in a bulletin memo. And those are all my reminders.
Tony, when Cindy South asked, will any backfill count toward the revenue increase limitation?
With a backfill amount, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I mean, that's not going to be something that assessors are reporting in the, I assume you're talking about in the 5.25 or even the 5.5, I guess. But it's not, you're not, in the certification forms, you're not putting in what their potential backfill would be. So that's up to that would be a DLG question more than a DPT question.
And I think Victor's online, Tony.
All right, Victor, did you have any thoughts on that? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Maybe not.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, as far as counting toward the revenue limits, our understanding is that the backfill comes from state general fund dollars, so it's more of a state grant. It's not coming from property tax sources because the state does not collect property tax. So that's our understanding. It won't count towards any property tax limit because it's not property tax.
Thank you, Victor. Any other questions? We figured we'd get done pretty quickly. So one of the things that when you start filling out this, and it's pretty easy when you're listening to about the new certification form and hearing Wendy go through it and it all sounds logical. It's not until you actually start filling these things out that you say, what about this? What about that? And I'm sure Wendy and Thomas will be very happy to answer all your questions. And when you're going through the process, And Lori and myself can be their backups, but we'll let them handle the primary questions. Yeah, Toby.
Well, since we seem to be at the end,
Uh-huh.
I want to ask about a different topic, and that is senior exemptions. I wonder if any of you at the state have a guess as to where we're going to land on the funding of senior exemptions in the next budget year, having seen some warnings about revenue forecasts. If you don't want to guess, what are the possible outcomes as you see them? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, Joanne, if you want to answer that. I did listen to their forecast, and it doesn't sound very good, but they have to make a decision on it. The legislation, that is, being they.
I can make no prediction for them. I would tell you last time they faced making an adjustment to the senior exemption. They did take it to 0. They left the veterans exemption alone. So you did still process all of the veterans exemptions, but they didn't fund the other exemption, the senior exemption. There is a chance that there's still going to be some Tabor money next year. And of course, the senior exemption, I think it was 2013, they made the senior exemption come first out of Tabor money. So it's first out. And when there's no Tabor money, it's last funded, if that makes sense. So it'll really depend on whether or not there's any Tabor money next year. Now, if there is no Tabor money, the legislature would actually have to carry legislation to take it from 50% to 0% of the first 200,000. And I imagine there will be groups that are not happy with that legislation, but they can't just do it. It's not automatic. They have to actually run legislation to make it happen. But they very well could. It'd probably be a joint budget committee bill.
And they would also probably include the local, that qualified, the new, what people call the portable one, the qualified senior
residential
classification.
Yes.
That would be.
That sounds like an end of session timing thing, not beginning.
Yeah, I would think it might come before the end of session, Toby, from a standpoint of if the joint budget committee is looking at not being able to fund it, it would happen around the time of the budget so that they can use that money for something else. I don't would wait to the very end of the session.
Yeah, so it would be this year would have been done in April.
Right, late March, early April.
Yep. But if you have concerned citizens asking you about that, you might want to tell them that the state has budget issues, and if they might want to plan on not receiving that if they're worried about budgeting for their property taxes.
Yeah, with just a few, just 15,000 of them. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just won't know yet.
Something else. And this is Jody. I'm just going to piggyback off of Toby. I know my office, we've seen a huge increase of putting the applications on because the largest generation of 65-year-olds are starting to come in and turn 65 this year. So sooner would be better than later, so we can start notifying our constituents that they need to be budgeting for their tax bill next year.
Yeah, we have absolutely no idea. Jody, you're going to know when we know. And you're going to know approximately the same time you see legislation introduced. If we get wind of something happening early, everything that I've seen when we work on fiscal notes, they also contact the Colorado Assessors Association. So I think we're all going to know, but we don't know now. And it's really going to depend on, is there enough money in Tabor next year to pay for the senior exemption backfill? The year after that's going to be more worrisome to me.
I agree. Thank you, Miss Joanne.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Joanne, while you're on, Andy asked if we know of a special session that may be called this fall. Have you heard anything in regards to that?
Not regarding property tax.
Thank you.
On that subject, Andy, and all, I have heard that there may be a special session called if the big beautiful bill passes at Congress because of its impact to Medicaid and that impact to the state. But that's the only special session that I've caught wind of, special session probable that I've caught wind of.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, feel free to reach out to Wendy Thomas about the new certification form, Tony or myself on the legislation and reporting. I've been putting some notes in the chat, so if you don't have the chat on, if you want to jump on there real quick, I've given you the website to get to our forms. I will be sending out a bulletin reminder the first 2 weeks of August for those reports, the actual value report, qualified share report. So we'll help you stay on top of everything that's required reporting wise. I also made a note of the SBOE meeting on October 10th at 10 o'clock. If you want to chime into that, you'll be able to hear the final results of where we're at with our 5% growth across the state and actual value. And I have dropped in the handout and the slide deck. If you still are in need of that, please let me know. I'm happy to share that with anybody. We did record the meeting. As soon as possible, we will have it up on our website in the video library. And just a final reminder, we are having a shareholder meeting similar to this for the abstract portal program updates. We will be holding that on Tuesday, July 1st at 2 o'clock. So if you want to put that on your calendars, it's also been in the bulletin, so please pre-register. We like to send out the documents ahead of time so that you have them to go through them as we go through them. So any questions, feel free to stay if you didn't want to ask in front of the group. Otherwise, that concludes our meeting.